Chapter 4: A Fateful Encounter. The storm erupted with a ferocity that seemed almost supernatural, as if the very heavens were unleashing their wrath upon the siren's call. The sky was swallowed by an inky darkness, an ominous void that seemed to stretch endlessly overhead. The sea, once a dependable companion, turned into a tumultuous adversary, heaving and tossing with a wild, untamed energy. Waves surged with such intensity that they crashed against the ship's hull, threatening to overwhelm it with their relentless force. The water churned beneath the ship, writhing like a beast determined to shake off its burdensome rider. At the heart of this tempest, Captain Adrian Blackthorne stood resolute at the wheel, his hands gripping it with a fierce determination. His knuckles were stark white, the strain of his grip reflecting the gravity of the situation. The storm's wrath battered the siren's call from all sides, with wind howling through the rigging like a pack of ravenous wolves. The sails flapped violently, their strained creaks mingling with the roar of the storm. Rain lashed down in torrents, turning the deck into a slick, treacherous surface that made every step a precarious endeavor. Amid the chaos, Adrian's focus was unwavering. His gaze was fixed ahead, locked onto the course they had to maintain despite the storm's attempts to thwart them. The ship groaned and bucked under the onslaught of nature's fury, each wave threatening to wrench it off course. Yet, with every ounce of strength and skill he possessed, Adrian fought to keep the siren's call steady. The storm raged on, a relentless test of their resolve, but Captain Blackthorne was determined to navigate through it, driven by the promise of the treasure that lay ahead. "Hold steady, men!" Adrian bellowed above the deafening roar of the tempest, his voice cutting through the chaos with a strained intensity. Usually a beacon of calm, his tone now bore the sharp edge of the storm's fury, reflecting the gravity of their situation. Despite the raging elements, his command was delivered with the force of authority, demanding the crew's immediate attention and action. The storm's clamor seemed to amplify his words, driving them deep into the hearts of his sailors. The crew, faces set in grim determination and pallid under the relentless onslaught of rain, scrambled to secure the lines with practiced urgency. Each man moved with a well-honed precision born from countless storms and battles at sea. The lashing rain turned their clothes into sodden rags, clinging to their bodies as they fought against the gale. Despite the violent buffeting of the ship, they worked in concert, their movements synchronized and efficient, a testament to their experience and dedication. As the wind shrieked through the rigging and the ship bucked beneath them, the crew's efforts were a mix of desperation and professionalism. Every muscle tensed under the strain, every action a vital part of the collective struggle to keep the siren's call afloat. Amid the chaos, their unwavering focus on their duties and their trust in their captain's leadership stood as a beacon of hope. Even as the storm's ferocity threatened to overwhelm them, the crew's resolve and skill ensured that the ship remained on course, battling the storm with all the might they could muster. But this storm was unlike any they had faced before. The waves surged to towering heights, their crests frothing with a menacing fury as they plummeted back into the sea. Each wave seemed like a mountain rising from the depths, crashing down with an overwhelming force that threatened to shatter the very timbers of the siren's call. The ship heaved and shuddered with each impact, the violent jolts reverberating through its hull and sending shivers through its frame. The storm's relentless assault turned the sea into a chaotic maelstrom, with waves of such magnitude that they seemed to claw at the ship, eager to pull it under. Each crashing wave was a force of nature, driven by the fury of the storm, and the ships would groan under the strain. The creaks and protests of the vessel blended with the tempest's roar, creating a cacophony that overwhelmed all other sounds. The timbers seemed to strain against the ocean's fury, their endurance tested to its limits. Amid the chaos, the crew struggled to maintain control, their efforts punctuated by the violent shaking of the ship. The storm raged on, a monstrous beast that seemed to take pleasure in the ship's suffering. Every clash of wave against hull was a reminder of their precarious situation, each shudder a reminder of the storm's overwhelming power. In the face of such a relentless force, the siren's call fought to stay afloat, its crew battling the storm's wrath with a determined resolve that matched the tempest's ferocity. Lightning slashed across the sky, its blinding brilliance slicing through the tempest's dark veil in jagged, ephemeral bursts. Each flash of lightning revealed a fleeting glimpse of the chaos that enveloped the siren's call, casting stark, eerie shadows across the roiling sea. The ship lurched violently to one side with each fierce gust of wind, the deck tilting at a precarious angle as the mast groaned under the unrelenting pressure. The scene was a tumultuous spectacle of flashing light and shadow, each moment a stark reminder of the storm's ferocity. Adrian's gaze darted anxiously to the horizon, seeking any sign of respite amid the overwhelming onslaught. The storm enveloped them entirely, a swirling vortex of dark fury that obscured any possible escape. His heart pounded in sync with the ship's shuddering motions, his eyes straining against the blinding rain and lightning in a desperate search for a break in the storm. The storm's monstrous embrace seemed unyielding, a relentless tempest that offered no quarter or indication of easing. The violent jolt of the ship, coupled with the shrieking wind and the thunder's deafening roar, made every moment feel like an eternity. Adrian's mind raced as he fought to keep his focus on the horizon, his determination unwavering despite the storm's overwhelming might. The chaos around them was a tumultuous dance of elemental forces, and through it all, Adrian's resolve remained firm, a solitary beacon of steadfastness amidst the storm's relentless rage. Suddenly, a deafening crack echoed through the storm, reverberating over the roaring sea as the main mast splintered into a shower of wood. The immense sound was followed by a rain of splintered timber that cascaded down onto the deck, scattering debris in every direction. The ship reeled violently under the impact, its hull shuddering and groaning as the once sturdy mast now lay in ruin. The sudden loss was a critical blow, shaking the vessel's stability and casting an ominous shadow over the crew's frantic efforts. Amidst the chaos, the crew's shouts of alarm cut through the storm's fury, their voices tinged with panic as they struggled to keep their footing on the slick, tilted deck. The relentless rain and fierce wind made the boards treacherously slippery, turning every movement into a battle against the elements. The ship's angle became increasingly precarious, with the crew fighting to maintain their balance and secure the remaining rigging, their faces etched with grim determination and fear. Adrian's heart sank as he took in the sight of the shattered mast and the chaos it had wrought. The loss of the main mast was a severe blow, leaving the Siren's Call vulnerable and at the mercy of the storm's unrelenting power. Without the mast, the ship's maneuverability and stability were severely compromised, heightening the peril they faced. Adrian's mind raced with a desperate resolve, knowing that survival now hinged on their ability to navigate the storm's fury with a crippled vessel. "Brace yourselves!" Adrian's voice cut through the storm, raw and strained as he tried to rally the crew. His command was swallowed by the roar of the tempest, but the urgency in his tone conveyed the gravity of their situation. Even as the words left his lips, he could see the helplessness in the crew's faces, their efforts to stabilize the ship seeming almost futile against the storm's overwhelming force. The turbulent sea and howling wind conspired against them, making every attempt to regain control feel like a lost cause. The ship was relentlessly pulled by the storm's grip, the currents yanking it off its intended course and dragging it into uncharted, treacherous waters. The familiar landmarks and navigational markers on their maps became distant memories as the Siren's Call was swept into the chaos of the storm's fury. Adrian's hands clenched the wheel, his muscles straining with the effort to steer through the tempest, but the forces at play were far beyond his control. With a final, wrenching heave, the wheel jerked violently in Adrian's grasp, the ship spinning uncontrollably as it was tossed by the monstrous waves. The sensation of being thrown about, coupled with the howling wind and crashing waves, created a chaotic maelstrom that seemed to pull the very essence of control from their grasp. The Siren's Call was now a mere plaything of the storm, its fate hanging in the balance as Adrian fought against the relentless, overpowering forces of nature. Adrian was hurled violently to the deck as the Siren's Call pitched and rolled uncontrollably through the storm. The impact knocked the wind from his lungs, leaving him gasping on the rain-slicked boards. The wind roared mercilessly, ripping at the sails and creating a maelstrom of chaos in the rigging. Ropes whipped through the air like serpents, tangling together in a chaotic frenzy of snapping lines and shifting shadows. The once orderly ship now resembled a beast in torment, its every part being torn apart by the storm's fury. The relentless storm overwhelmed all other sounds, swallowing up the frantic cries of the crew and the ominous splintering of wood as it gave way under the storm's assault. The rain hammered down with a deafening drumbeat, each drop seeming to strike with the force of a small cannonball. The din was unrelenting, a constant roar that seemed to merge into a singular, oppressive force. Adrian could barely distinguish the shouts of his men from the natural cacophony, their voices drowned out by the storm's overwhelming presence. Struggling to rise against the force of the tempest, Adrian's vision was a blur of rain and lightning. Each crash of thunder seemed to shake the very foundation of the ship, and the swirling sea around them became a maelstrom of darkness and frothy white caps. The relentless storm had taken hold of the Siren's Call, and despite Adrian's best efforts, it was clear that their fate now rested in the hands of the Tempest's whim. And then, just as abruptly as it had begun, the storm's ferocity began to wane. The wind's howling diminished to a mournful, ghostly wail, its relentless pressure easing off. The torrential rain gradually softened to a persistent drizzle, though the sea remained a tumultuous expanse of angry waves. The dark clouds, now frayed and scattered, began to drift away, revealing patches of a bruised, weary sky. Adrian struggled to his feet, his body protesting with every movement as aching muscles reminded him of the intense battle against the storm. His gaze swept over the deck, taking in the sight of his battered ship and the remnants of the storm's wrath. Around him, the crew began to rise, their movements slow and deliberate as they fought off fatigue. Their faces, smeared with grime and drenched from the storm, were etched with lines of exhaustion and fear. Despite the storm's retreat, the aftermath was a grim tableau of broken rigging, scattered debris, and a deck strewn with the detritus of their struggle. The crew's spirits, though bruised, were unbroken as they set about the grim task of assessing the damage and making the necessary repairs. The storm had tested them to their limits, but they had survived. For Adrian and his crew, the challenge now lay in salvaging their journey and pressing on despite the heavy toll the tempest had taken. Adrian's gaze swept over the damage with a mixture of dismay and determination. The main mast, once a proud centerpiece of the Siren's Call, had been shattered, leaving a jagged stump where it had stood. The sails, now nothing more than ragged shreds, flapped uselessly in the weak breeze. The ship itself was listing precariously to one side, its balance compromised by the violent battering it had endured. Water had breached the lower deck, creating a sloshing flood that mingled with the debris scattered across the floor. The sight of the ship's battered condition was a stark reminder of the storm's ferocity. The damage was extensive, rigging lay in tangled heaps, and parts of the deck were strewn with broken wood and torn canvas. The waterlogged lower deck, now partially submerged, added another layer of urgency to the situation. Without immediate and effective repairs, the vessel's integrity was at risk, and the crew's safety was far from assured. Adrian's mind raced as he assessed the situation. He knew that time was of the essence. If they didn't address the damage swiftly and efficiently, another storm, or even rough seas could prove disastrous. With the ship's survival hanging in the balance, he turned to his crew, his voice firm and resolute. They had weathered the storm, but the true test now lay in their ability to restore their ship and continue their perilous journey toward the Crimson Isles. "Land ho!" The shout rang out, piercing through the haze of rain and mist that clung to the Siren's Call. The lookout's voice, though strained, carried a note of exhilaration that cut through the ship's desolate atmosphere. The crew, worn and battered from the storm, perked up at the sound, their weary eyes lifting toward the horizon in hope. Through the lingering fog and the remnants of the storm, the outline of land began to emerge, a shadowy promise of refuge after their harrowing ordeal. The sight of it brought a collective sigh of relief from the exhausted crew. Even as the waves continued to churn and the rain drizzled, the prospect of solid ground and a chance to repair their vessel offered a beacon of hope. Adrian, still grappling with the storm's aftermath, felt a surge of determination at the news. The land that lay before them was not just a destination. It was a crucial respite from their trials, a place where they could assess the damage, make necessary repairs, and regroup. With a renewed sense of purpose, he turned to his crew, rallying them for the final stretch of their journey toward the promising shore. Adrian turned sharply, his eyes narrowing as he peered into the distance. Through the thinning fog, the first signs of land began to materialize. The shadowy outline of an island emerged, a stark silhouette against the tumultuous sea. Its form was jagged and imposing, a mass of dark rock and dense forest rising out of the water like a sentinel guarding the unknown. The island, uncharted and cloaked in mystery, held a promise of refuge amidst their dire situation. Its rugged appearance, with cliffs that seemed to pierce the sky and a tangled canopy of trees, was both foreboding and intriguing. It stood as their only chance of salvation after the ferocity of the storm, offering the possibility of safety and the much-needed respite from the chaos that had plagued them. Adrian's gaze remained fixed on the island as he contemplated their approach. It was clear that the island would demand caution and resolve, but it was a beacon of hope in their sea of troubles. With the storm easing, he steeled himself for the challenges ahead, readying his crew for the next critical phase of their journey. "Bring her about," Adrian ordered, his voice cutting through the remnants of the storm with a firmness that belied the chaos around him. The crew, weary but resolute, scrambled to follow his command. Their movements were slower now, burdened by exhaustion and the damage sustained during the tempest, but their determination shone through as they worked to maneuver the battered ship. The siren's call groaned under the strain as it pivoted, the torn sails flapping weakly in the diminishing wind. The sea, though still turbulent, seemed to offer a sliver of mercy. The waves, once harsh and unyielding, now appeared to nudge the ship in the direction of the island, as if sensing their desperate need for refuge. The shifting currents seemed to guide them with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the storm's earlier fury. As the siren's call slowly altered its course, the island loomed closer, its dark outline growing more defined against the fading storm clouds. The crew continued their arduous task, their faces set with grim resolve as they adjusted the sails and steered the vessel through the choppy waters. Despite the ship's condition, the sight of land on the horizon filled them with a renewed sense of hope and urgency. As the siren's call drew closer, the island's imposing presence became more evident. Its jagged cliffs rose dramatically from the sea, their rugged edges a stark contrast to the smooth horizon they had been navigating. The once turbulent waters began to ease as the island's natural barrier shielded them from the worst of the storm's aftermath. The bay into which they entered offered a deceptive calm, a stark relief from the chaos they had endured. The ship moved slowly, its battered hull scraping against the rocky shoreline with a final, weary groan. The crew, though exhausted, sprang into action with a mix of urgency and relief. They worked together to lower the anchor, their movements marked by a frantic precision as they secured the siren's call to prevent it from drifting back into the rough waters. The clattering of the anchor and the creaking of the chain were the only sounds that cut through the stillness as they managed to stabilize the ship. With the vessel finally anchored, the crew took a moment to survey their surroundings. The island's formidable cliffs loomed overhead, offering both a daunting and protective presence. The bay, now calm and serene, promised a temporary respite where they could begin the much-needed repairs. Despite their exhaustion and the damage they faced, the sight of solid land and the shelter it provided offered a glimmer of hope amidst their battered spirits. Adrian took a deep breath, letting the crisp, salty air fill his lungs as the last remnants of the storm clouds slowly drifted away. The oppressive weight of the tempest seemed to lift, replaced by a tentative calm that settled over the siren's call and its weary crew. Before them lay the island, its silhouette still partially obscured by the lingering mist of the storm, but now more defined against the clearing sky. The dense jungle that cloaked the island's interior was an enigma, its dark green canopy hiding the mysteries and challenges that awaited them. The island, though still shrouded in the unknown, offered a crucial sanctuary amidst their trials. Its towering cliffs and rocky shores provided a natural barrier from the ravaged sea, making it a vital refuge for Adrian and his crew. The immediate priority was clear: to use this unexpected haven to tend to their damaged ship and gather their strength. The sight of the island, despite its foreboding appearance, brought a sense of relief and a renewed focus on survival. As the crew began to disembark and assess the damage, Adrian's thoughts turned to the tasks ahead. The storm had left them battered and their ship in dire need of repair, but the island's sheltering embrace offered a chance to regroup and strategize. Though the jungle promised its own set of challenges, for now, it stood as a beacon of hope, a place where they could recover and prepare for whatever lay beyond its verdant depths. Adrian stood before his crew, his voice firm and resolute despite the exhaustion etched on his face. "We've been thrown off course," he announced, meeting the eyes of his men with unwavering determination. The storm had battered them, and their trajectory had veered far from the path they had planned, but Adrian's confidence was a steadying force amid their weariness. "But we're not lost," he continued, his tone carrying the promise of resolve and leadership that had guided them through countless trials before. He gestured toward the damage that marred the siren's call, a stark reminder of the storm's ferocity. "We'll make what repairs we can," Adrian said, outlining the immediate tasks that lay ahead. The sight of the wrecked mast and tattered sails was a somber one, but his words were a call to action. The crew, though battered and drained, understood the urgency of their situation. They rallied around the ship, preparing to undertake the necessary work to restore her to seaworthy condition. Adrian's gaze shifted back to the distant horizon, where the island's rugged silhouette stood stark against the clearing sky. "And then we'll find our way back to the Crimson Isles," he declared, infusing his words with a sense of purpose that transcended the immediate obstacles. The journey had been interrupted, but their quest for the legendary treasure was far from over. The promise of the Crimson Isles and the treasure they sought remained a beacon, guiding them through the trials they faced and driving them forward with renewed determination. The men nodded in agreement, their faces set with a mix of grim determination and fatigue. The storm had been brutal, leaving the siren's call battered and in need of extensive repairs. Yet, despite the toll it had taken, their resolve remained unshaken. They spread out across the ship, each man tasked with assessing the damage, securing loose rigging, and preparing for the necessary repairs. The island's rocky shore, once a harbinger of their peril, now stood as a temporary haven where they could regroup and strategize for the journey ahead. As the crew busied themselves with their tasks, Adrian's mind wandered, reflecting on the tempest that had nearly claimed them. The storm had been unlike any he had encountered before, its fury almost unnatural, as though it had been deliberately set upon them. Adrian could not shake the feeling that the storm had been more than a mere act of nature. It had seemed almost sentient, a force that had maneuvered them toward this uncharted island with a purpose of its own. The thought gnawed at him, intertwining with his thoughts of the treasure they sought. Adrian's gaze drifted to the dense jungle that cloaked the island, its shadows hinting at mysteries yet to be uncovered. The storm's passage had left them on uncertain ground, both literally and figuratively. He contemplated the possibility that their unforeseen detour might have been more than a misfortune. It could be a sign or a test, guiding them toward a fate they had yet to understand. The challenges they faced were daunting, but Adrian's resolve only hardened. The island was now a part of their journey, and he was determined to uncover its role in their quest for the Crimson Isles. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, its fiery rays painted the island in a blood-red hue, casting long shadows that stretched across the rocky shore. Adrian stood at the edge of the bay, his eyes fixed on the dense jungle that loomed before him. The crimson light seemed to set the stage for the unknown, as if the island itself was a harbinger of the trials and mysteries yet to unfold. The serene beauty of the sunset belied the turmoil of the day, leaving Adrian with a gnawing sense of foreboding. The events of the storm, coupled with their sudden arrival on this uncharted land, felt like more than mere coincidence. Adrian's instincts told him that their encounter with the island was a pivotal moment in their quest, a prelude to the challenges and revelations awaiting them. The storm had not only tested their resolve but had also thrust them into a new and perilous chapter of their adventure. The island, with its shadowy forest and untamed wilderness, seemed to hold secrets that could either aid or hinder their pursuit of the legendary treasure. As darkness began to encroach, Adrian could not shake the feeling that this unexpected detour was not just a setback but a significant turn in their journey. The island's ominous presence, and the strange sense of destiny that accompanied their arrival hinted at a deeper significance. Adrian's mind raced with possibilities, wondering what lay ahead in the heart of the jungle and how it would shape their path to the Crimson Isles. With the sun setting and the island shrouded in twilight, he prepared himself and his crew for whatever might come next, knowing that their quest was far from over. Chapter 5: The Island's Secret. The dense jungle swallowed the fading light, its towering canopy casting long, tangled shadows that stretched across the uneven ground. As Adrian Blackthorn forged his way through the overgrown foliage, the lushness of the island seemed to envelop him, creating a maze of verdant walls that pressed him from all sides. The air was thick with the earthy scent of damp soil and decaying leaves, and the occasional rustle of unseen creatures kept him on alert. Each step forward was a careful negotiation through the dense underbrush, with every branch and vine threatening to entangle him. The island's wild, untamed nature stood in stark contrast to the controlled environment of the ship. Here, the jungle was a living, breathing entity, its towering trees and thick vines forming a labyrinth of greenery that felt both enchanting and menacing. The undergrowth was so dense that Adrian could scarcely see more than a few feet ahead, and the narrow paths he followed were often obscured by the tangled roots and fallen branches that littered the ground. The dense foliage seemed to close in around him, heightening the sense of isolation from the world he had known. Despite the constant, distant sound of waves crashing against the rocky shore, the jungle felt like a world apart, its sounds and sights drawing Adrian's full attention. The sea, which had guided them to this mysterious place, was now a mere memory, its roar a faint echo against the persistent buzz of jungle life. Every so often, the fleeting glimpse of a hidden pathway or the call of an exotic bird added to the feeling of adventure and trepidation. With each step deeper into the island, Adrian's focus sharpened, driven by the pressing need to uncover the secrets that lay ahead in this untamed wilderness. He had left the crew behind to tend to the ship, fully aware that his curiosity about the island would never allow him to sit idle. The storm, with all its fury and chaos, had deposited them on this mysterious land, and Adrian's instincts drove him to seek out its secrets. The crew's task was to repair the ship and secure their position, but for Adrian, the call of the unknown was irresistible. He felt a compelling need to explore, as though some unseen force was guiding him through the dense jungle. As he ventured deeper into the wilderness, Adrian was acutely aware of a subtle, almost imperceptible pull drawing him forward. It was a sensation that went beyond mere curiosity, something intangible, a whisper in the recesses of his mind urging him to uncover what lay hidden in the heart of the island. Every step he took seemed to resonate with a growing sense of purpose, and the more he pushed through the thick underbrush, the more convinced he became that this place was integral to their journey. The storm that had battered them and the treacherous waters they had navigated seemed to pale in comparison to the mystery of the island. Adrian was driven by the belief that their arrival here was no mere accident. There was a reason, a deeper significance to their presence on this uncharted land, and he was determined to unravel it. The jungle's secrets, the whispers of the storm, and the uncharted territory all seemed to converge, urging him to discover what lay ahead in the depths of this enigmatic wilderness. As he pushed through a tangle of vines, the ground beneath Adrian's boots began to slope downward, leading him into a hidden part of the island. The air grew cooler and damper, a stark contrast to the heat and humidity of the jungle canopy above. The thick foliage blocked out most of the sunlight, leaving only faint, scattered beams to light his path. This deepening shadow created an atmosphere of mystery and suspense, heightening his senses as he navigated the dense underbrush. The cool, damp air clung to him, carrying with it the earthy scent of moss and decomposing leaves. The oppressive darkness of the canopy seemed to draw closer, yet Adrian felt a peculiar sense of excitement building within him. Despite the foreboding atmosphere, there was an undeniable thrill in the air, a feeling that he was approaching something of great significance. Every step he took seemed to resonate with the promise of discovery, amplifying his anticipation. Adrian's heart raced with the realization that he was on the verge of uncovering something monumental. The jungle's oppressive gloom and the dampness of the ground only seemed to deepen his sense of expectation. He pressed forward with a growing conviction that the secrets hidden in this part of the island held the key to understanding why the storm had led them here. The sensation of standing on the edge of a significant revelation drove him onward, eager to uncover whatever lay in wait just beyond the veil of shadows. It wasn't long before Adrian emerged from the tangled underbrush and found himself standing before the mouth of a cave, partially obscured by the encroaching jungle. The entrance was narrow and foreboding, its rock walls slick with layers of moss and moisture that glistened in the dim light. The cave seemed almost alive, a natural fissure in the earth that exhaled a cold, eerie draft. This draught carried with it the faint scent of the sea mingled with something older, something primordial and ancient. The cave's opening appeared to pulse with an almost organic rhythm, as if it was drawing in the surrounding humidity and exhaling the chill of its hidden depths. The sound of the distant sea was faint but distinct, adding to the sense of being on the threshold of something significant. The ancient aroma that permeated the cave hinted at millennia of untouched history, evoking a feeling of reverence and awe that drew Adrian closer. Adrian's breath quickened as he stepped closer to the cave's entrance, the cool air brushing against his face and heightening his anticipation. The contrast between the oppressive heat of the jungle and the refreshing chill of the cave made the entrance even more inviting. He could sense that this cave held secrets long buried, and the faint scent of the sea mingling with the ancient musk only deepened his resolve to uncover what lay hidden within. Adrian hesitated for only a moment, his seasoned instincts as a captain compelling him to press on despite the darkness that awaited within. As he stepped into the cave, the world outside seemed to fall away, leaving him enveloped in a profound, almost oppressive blackness. His only source of illumination was a small lantern that cast a weak, flickering light into the cavernous space. The flame wavered uncertainly, growing eerie, dancing shadows across the uneven walls. The cave's interior revealed itself in fragments of wavering light, and Adrian could make out strange, worn carvings etched into the rock. These ancient symbols and images seemed to tell a story, one long forgotten by time. The carvings depicted scenes that hinted at rituals and figures, their details obscured by centuries of erosion and neglect. Each shape and line seemed to whisper secrets of the past, drawing Adrian deeper into the cavern's depths. With every step, Adrian felt a growing sense of intrigue and anticipation. The shadows cast by his lantern flickered ominously, creating an atmosphere that was both mesmerizing and unsettling. The cave, with its hidden history and mysterious carvings, promised to reveal more about the island's ancient past. Driven by a mixture of curiosity and determination, Adrian ventured further into the dark, eager to uncover the secrets that lay shrouded within the cave's cold embrace. As Adrian ventured deeper into the cave, the air grew colder, a chill that seeped into his bones despite the warmth of his clothing. Each step he took reverberated through the cavern, the echoes amplifying the stillness that enveloped him. The cave's path twisted and turned unpredictably, narrowing to tight squeezes in some areas before opening up into larger, more expansive sections. The labyrinthine nature of the cave seemed almost purposeful, guiding him deeper into its enigmatic depths. Eventually, Adrian emerged into a vast chamber that took his breath away. The space stretched out before him, the ceiling arching high into the darkness, completely lost from view. The walls of the chamber were adorned with the same strange carvings he had seen earlier, but here, they were even more intricate and detailed. The carvings seemed to form elaborate scenes and symbols, their complexity hinting at the significance of whatever ancient culture had created them. The flickering light from his lantern barely scratched the surface of these elaborate designs, leaving much of their meaning shrouded in shadow. The vastness of the chamber, and the elaborate carvings on the walls created a sense of awe and reverence within Adrian. The cold, damp air and the echoes of his own footsteps added to the feeling of isolation and discovery. As he stood in the middle of the chamber, he couldn't help but feel that he was on the brink of uncovering something monumental, an ancient secret that had been hidden away, waiting for someone like him to stumble upon it. In the heart of the chamber, a solitary stone pedestal stood like a sentinel of time. The pedestal, rough-hewn and ancient, seemed to rise from the floor as though it had grown there, its surface covered in the same moss and moisture that clung to the cave's walls. Atop this pedestal lay an object that immediately captured Adrian's full attention, a weathered scroll sealed with a symbol that sent a jolt of recognition through him. The emblem, an intricate design he had seen before, matched one of the cryptic markings on the map that had guided him through countless dangers. Adrian's pulse quickened as he drew closer to the pedestal, his eyes never leaving the scroll. The parchment was old and brittle, its edges curled and darkened with age, yet the seal remained intact, a testament to its preservation through the ages. His fingers hovered over the ancient parchment, the very air around it seeming to thrum with significance. The sight of the scroll, so meticulously preserved and placed in the center of this hidden chamber, filled him with a sense of both reverence and anticipation. With a mix of awe and caution, Adrian reached out and gently touched the scroll, feeling the rough texture of the parchment beneath his fingertips. The seal was an intricate wax emblem, its design a perfect match to the one that had guided his journey. As he carefully broke the seal and unrolled the scroll, the dim light of his lantern flickered across its surface, revealing the faded ink of what appeared to be a map or manuscript, its contents obscured but undoubtedly crucial to the quest that had brought him here. With deliberate care, Adrian broke the seal and began to unroll the ancient scroll. The parchment, though fragile, unfurled with a soft rustle, revealing text inscribed in a language that had long since fallen out of common use. Adrian's years of studying ancient texts and deciphering forgotten languages were about to pay off. The intricate script, though challenging, was decipherable to him, and as he began to translate, the scroll's secrets started to unfold. The text described in vivid detail a legendary horde, hidden away by a civilization whose existence had been lost to time. This once thriving society, as the scroll narrated, had amassed great wealth, concealing their treasures in a secret location on the very island where Adrian now stood. The description was both enticing and foreboding, painting a picture of immense riches that had been safeguarded with a complex array of traps and puzzles, meant to protect their legacy from those unworthy of it. Yet, as Adrian's eyes moved over the faded ink, a chilling revelation emerged. The scroll spoke not only of the treasure but also of a curse that would befall anyone who dared to claim it for themselves. This curse, according to the ancient text, was a potent force designed to ensure that the treasure remained undisturbed. The warnings were explicit and grave, hinting at dire consequences for those who sought the riches with greed in their hearts. The combination of the promise of great wealth and the threat of an ancient curse set Adrian's mind racing, the weight of the decision he faced now heavier than ever. As Adrian read the scroll, the intricate carvings on the cave walls seemed to animate, their patterns shifting in the flickering light of his lantern. Each engraving illustrated scenes from a long-forgotten era, depicting the life of a great king who had accumulated a fortune beyond anyone's wildest dreams. The walls told the story of this king's opulence and the immense wealth he had garnered, but also of his growing paranoia that such wealth would eventually lead to his ruin. In a bid to protect his fortune, the king had hidden it away in a secret chamber, concealed deep within the island's labyrinthine depths. The carvings vividly depicted the construction of this hidden vault, emphasizing the intricate and powerful magic that had been employed to guard it. The king's fear of losing his treasure had driven him to extreme measures, ensuring that the chamber was sealed by enchantments that would thwart any who attempted to breach it without the proper knowledge or intent. The final layer of protection, as the scroll revealed, was the curse. This curse was not merely a deterrent but a test of worthiness, designed to ensure that only those who were truly deserving, or those whose ambition blinded them to the perils, would be able to claim the treasure. The carving's dynamic storytelling underscored the gravity of the curse, adding a layer of mystique and forewarning to the tale. Adrian felt the weight of the king's legacy and the daunting challenge that lay ahead, knowing that the path to the treasure was fraught with both incredible rewards and formidable risks. Adrian's mind raced as he absorbed the implications of the scroll. The clues detailed in its ancient script aligned perfectly with the map he had acquired, directing him unerringly toward the Crimson Isles. The promise of the treasure, tantalizingly close, seemed within reach. Yet the curse described in the scroll cast a long shadow over his excitement. Its warnings were clear, and Adrian knew all too well that legends often held a kernel of truth, their origins steeped in real fears and ancient realities. Despite his experience and bravery, Adrian couldn't dismiss the potential reality of the curse. Throughout his life, he had encountered countless dangers and deceptive myths, but the prospect of a curse added a new dimension to his perilous journey. He had learned that the lure of unimaginable wealth could lead men to madness, distorting their perceptions and making them susceptible to dangers both real and imagined. The scroll's dark promise of a curse made him question whether the true danger lay in the curse itself, or in the psychological grip of fear and greed that could undermine his resolve. Yet, Adrian was not one to be easily deterred. His experiences had taught him that the quest for treasure was as much about overcoming internal fears as it was about navigating physical dangers. The legends that accompanied treasure often served as both warnings and tests, designed to challenge those who sought the riches. With this in mind, Adrian steeled himself, recognizing that the path ahead would require not only courage and skill but also a clear mind unclouded by the allure of wealth or the specter of ancient curses. As Adrian stood amidst the shadows of the ancient chamber, the scroll's weight felt both literal and metaphorical in his hands. The flickering lantern light cast long, wavering shadows on the walls, making the carvings appear almost alive. Despite the chilling warnings of the curse, the promise of the hidden treasure was too compelling to ignore. The path had been arduous, fraught with perils and setbacks, and he was now on the cusp of a breakthrough that could change everything. Adrian's resolve hardened as he contemplated the scroll's contents. The legend of the treasure, with its promise of unimaginable wealth, was tantalizingly close. He had ventured far beyond the comfort of familiar seas and faced challenges that had tested his limits. To abandon the quest now, after coming so close, would be to forfeit everything he had strived for. The curse, while ominous, would not deter him. He was driven by a determination that had seen him through many trials. With a deep breath, Adrian made his decision. He would press forward, embracing the risks that lay ahead. The treasure was within reach, and he would not retreat. The storm had brought them to this island, and the scroll had revealed the next step in their journey. Whatever dangers the curse might entail, Adrian was prepared to face them. His focus was unwavering, his determination clear. He would continue the quest, no matter the cost. As Adrian emerged from the cave, the dense jungle seemed to envelop him once more, its thick foliage closing in around him with an almost sentient presence. The once familiar sounds of the jungle now seemed more ominous, the rustling leaves and distant calls of unseen creatures taking on a new, unsettling tone. The warmth of the cave's interior was replaced by a cool, biting wind that swept through the trees, carrying with it an unsettling chill that prickled his skin. The wind whispered through the canopy, weaving its way through the tangled vines and branches. Its voice was faint but insistent, like a ghostly warning that echoed in Adrian's ears. Each gust seemed to carry a promise of more danger, as if the island itself was not yet done testing him. The cold breeze made the jungle feel alive and hostile, a stark contrast to the refuge it had provided moments before. Adrian's heart raced as he navigated through the thick undergrowth, the weight of the scroll and its ominous warning heavy in his thoughts. The island had revealed one of its secrets, but the true peril of their quest was only beginning to unfold. The sense of foreboding grew stronger with each step, the jungle closing in around him as if to remind him that the dangers they faced were far from over. Chapter 6: Meeting the Mermaid Prince. As Adrian made his way back to the cave, the atmosphere inside seemed to shift palpably, as though the very walls were aware of his return. The dim light from his lantern flickered unevenly, casting long, shifting shadows that danced across the rough-hewn stone. The air was colder now, carrying a damp, earthy scent that mingled with the lingering aroma of ancient dust. Each step he took echoed ominously, amplifying the sense of foreboding that had settled over him since he had read the scroll. The weight of the scroll felt heavier than before, its secrets pressing down on Adrian's mind with a newfound gravity. The tales of the treasure, and the curse that guarded it had ignited his determination, but they had also introduced a strange sense of unease. It was as if the island itself was responding to his quest, its ancient power stirring in the shadows and sending ripples of unease through the still air of the cave. The once encouraging promise of fortune now seemed intertwined with a more sinister, almost malevolent energy. The cave, once a place of potential discovery, now felt like a labyrinth of hidden dangers, its passages and corners shrouded in mystery and threat. Adrian could almost feel the presence of the ancient civilization that had once inhabited the island, their long-forgotten gaze watching him from the darkness. The deeper he ventured into the cave, the more it seemed to pulse with a life of its own, a stark reminder that their journey was far from over and that the true peril lay ahead. As Adrian descended into the cave once more, the dwindling light of the setting sun barely penetrated the entrance, leaving the interior cloaked in an almost impenetrable darkness. His lantern's flickering flame created a tenuous glow that wavered against the stone walls, casting eerie, shifting shadows that appeared to writhe and slither, as if alive. Each step he took seemed to deepen the shadows, enhancing the cave's oppressive atmosphere. Navigating the winding path with practiced care, Adrian moved with the intent of retracing his steps to the vast chamber where he had first discovered the ancient scroll. The twisting tunnels seemed to close in around him, the air growing cooler and heavier with each descent. His memory of the intricate carvings on the walls was vivid, the symbols and images hauntingly clear in his mind's eye as he made his way back to the chamber. Upon reaching the chamber, the cavernous space stretched before him, its high ceiling lost in the enveloping darkness. The carvings on the walls, now illuminated by the lantern's pale light, seemed even more pronounced and intricate than before, their details revealing a deeper narrative as Adrian scrutinized them. The eerie shadows cast by the lantern's light danced across the chamber, amplifying the sense of ancient mystery and tension that filled the air, as if the cave itself was holding its breath, waiting for him to uncover more of its secrets. But something had undeniably changed. As Adrian stepped into the chamber, he was immediately struck by a palpable shift in the atmosphere. The air felt charged with an electric tension, a subtle but undeniable energy that made the hairs on the back of his neck prickle in response. It was as if the very environment was aware of his presence, its intensity heightened by an unseen force. The shadows that had once danced eerily along the walls now seemed to have deepened and thickened, creating an almost tangible darkness that pressed in on him from all sides. The lantern's light, which had previously seemed to push back against the encroaching gloom, now appeared diminished, struggling to penetrate the oppressive blackness that enveloped the chamber. The darkness felt heavier, more profound, as though it were a living entity reacting to his intrusion. The sense of anticipation in the chamber was unmistakable, an almost sentient awareness that seemed to hold its breath and wait. Each step Adrian took echoed ominously in the vast space, the cavern itself seeming to brace for whatever was about to unfold. The air was thick with an ancient, unsettling energy, as if the cave was responding to his renewed exploration with a quiet but menacing vigilance. And then he saw him. At first, Adrian wondered if the dim light and shifting shadows were playing tricks on his eyes. He squinted, trying to make sense of the form that seemed to emerge from the darkness. The figure, half hidden by the cavern's oppressive gloom, appeared to be a man, or at least something that resembled one, standing near the stone pedestal where the scroll had rested. As Adrian drew nearer, the form became more distinct, and the shadows seemed to coalesce around it, revealing details that defied easy explanation. The figure's skin was an eerie, almost spectral white, glowing faintly in the weak lantern light as though it were infused with an inner luminescence. It was an unsettling sight, the kind that sent a chill racing down Adrian's spine. His hair cascaded down in dark, lustrous waves, catching the scant light and shimmering with an unnatural sheen that seemed to defy the normal constraints of reality. The contrast between the figure's ethereal glow and the dark surroundings only heightened the sense of otherworldly presence. Adrian's heart pounded in his chest as he took in the full scope of the apparition. The figure stood motionless, an enigmatic presence that seemed both integral to the cave's mysteries and profoundly out of place. Its appearance was not merely an illusion created by the play of light and shadow but a tangible entity that filled the space with an eerie, palpable aura. The strange figure, with its ghostly pallor and unnervingly calm demeanor, seemed to be waiting, perhaps for Adrian, or for something yet to be revealed. But it was the eyes that truly captivated Adrian's attention. They were deep, bottomless pools of the ocean's darkest depths, seeming to hold a reflection of the endless abyss. The eyes shimmered with an otherworldly light, their unnatural brilliance contrasting starkly with the dim surroundings of the cave. It was as if they contained within them the secrets of the ocean, and the very essence of the storm that had thrown Adrian off course. The gaze was both haunting and mesmerizing, drawing Adrian in with an intensity that was impossible to ignore. The eyes seemed to pierce through the veil of reality, revealing a world beyond the tangible. They held an ancient wisdom and a profound sorrow, as though they had witnessed countless ages and bore witness to the rise and fall of civilizations lost to time. The more Adrian stared, the more he felt a disquieting sense of connection with the figure. Those dark, shimmering eyes were not just observing but seemed to be communicating a silent, inscrutable message. The intensity of the gaze made him question the nature of the figure's presence, and the true extent of the island's mysteries. In that moment, Adrian knew that the journey ahead would be far more complex and perilous than he had ever anticipated. "Who are you?" Adrian demanded, his voice steady despite the sudden rush of adrenaline that surged through him. His hand instinctively reached for the hilt of his sword, though a deep, unsettling sense told him that mere steel might be of little use against this enigmatic figure. The question cut through the tension in the chamber, echoing off the cold stone walls as Adrian's eyes remained locked with those of the mysterious being. The figure, unmoved by Adrian's challenge, seemed to absorb the question with an almost serene calm. The air between them seemed to thicken, the energy in the cave palpable and charged with an ancient, almost sentient force. Adrian's heart pounded in his chest, the feeling of vulnerability heightening his awareness of the danger that lay before him. Despite the creature's stillness, Adrian felt an overwhelming sense of being scrutinized, as though the figure could see into the very depths of his soul. The shadows around them deepened, making the presence of the figure even more foreboding. Adrian's grip tightened on the hilt of his sword, ready for whatever confrontation might come, but the unease in his gut told him that the true nature of this encounter was beyond any physical threat he had faced before. The figure turned slowly, his movements imbued with a fluid grace that suggested he was more at home in water than on land. Each motion was deliberate and serene, as if he were navigating through an unseen current rather than the air. His presence seemed to draw the shadows closer, the darkness around him almost accentuating the ethereal quality of his form. When he spoke, his voice was smooth and melodic, weaving through the chamber with a haunting beauty that contrasted starkly with the somber surroundings. The tone carried a melancholic undertone, a sadness that seemed to resonate deeply with Adrian, stirring emotions he couldn't quite place. The words themselves were cloaked in an otherworldly lilt, adding to the sense that this being was far removed from the ordinary realm Adrian was familiar with. The sadness in the figure's voice tugged at something buried deep within Adrian's chest, evoking a profound sense of empathy and curiosity. It was as though the figure's sorrow mirrored an ancient grief, one that had seeped into the very walls of the cave. Adrian found himself momentarily disarmed, the immediate threat of confrontation overshadowed by the compelling and enigmatic sorrow that the figure embodied. "My name is Kale," the figure said, his gaze meeting Adrian's with a calm intensity that seemed to pierce through the dim light. His eyes, reflecting the deep, dark blues of the ocean, held an unsettling yet mesmerizing quality. The name carried a weight, imbued with a sense of grandeur and a history that seemed as vast as the sea itself. He continued, his voice tinged with a sorrowful melody. "Once I was a prince of the sea." The words were spoken with a distant reverence, as if recalling a life that was both cherished and irrevocably lost. The description painted a vivid picture of a regal figure whose domain was the boundless ocean, now starkly contrasted with his current, land-bound existence. "But now I am bound to this land, cursed to walk beneath the moonlight until the tides of fate shift once more." The lament in his voice deepened, resonating with an ancient grief and a profound longing for redemption. The curse he spoke of seemed to tether him to the very earth, a poignant reminder of the fate that had stripped him of his former glory and left him waiting for a chance to return to his true home. Adrian's grip on his sword relaxed slightly, though he kept his stance ready and vigilant. The revelation about Kale's identity, a prince of the sea, was both bewildering and intriguing. His mind grappled with skepticism, trying to reconcile the fantastical nature of Kale's claim with the reality he had always known. The sword, once a symbol of protection and authority, now felt almost insignificant in the face of such an otherworldly presence. "Prince of the sea?" Adrian echoed, his voice carrying a hint of disbelief as he searched Kale's eyes for any sign of deception. The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy with the weight of both incredulity and the faint stirrings of acceptance. Kale's aura, so distinctly out of place in the dim, stone chamber, was compelling enough to challenge Adrian's hardened skepticism. Despite the doubts that churned within him, there was something about Kale's demeanor, a blend of regal bearing and haunting sadness, that struck a chord deep inside Adrian. The strange sense of belief that Kale's presence evoked fought against his rational mind, making it difficult to dismiss the prince's story entirely. The clash between skepticism and belief created a tense undercurrent, as Adrian stood face to face with the enigmatic figure from the depths of the sea. Cale nodded, a faint smile touching his lips, though it did little to ease the sorrow in his eyes. A prince of the merfolk, bound by magic older than your kind can imagine. I was once free, able to roam the oceans at will, but now... He looked down at his hands, the webbing between his fingers barely visible in the dim light. Now I am trapped, cursed to live on land under the moonlight's gaze, either fully man nor fully mare. His voice was filled with a quiet resignation, the weight of centuries of isolation evident in every word. Adrian felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cave's cold air. The tale sounded like something out of a sailor's legend, but the conviction in Cale's voice made it difficult to dismiss. The sorrow in Cale's eyes, the faint webbing on his fingers, everything about him spoke of a truth that Adrian could not easily ignore. Yet, the captain's mind raced with questions. How could a being such as this exist? And more importantly, what role did Cale play in the mystery of the treasure and the curse that surrounded it? As the silence stretched between them, Adrian realized that Cale was waiting for him to speak, to ask the questions that burned in his mind. But instead of words, all Adrian could manage was a nod, a silent acknowledgement of the strange and tragic figure before him. The journey that had brought Adrian to this island had taken an unexpected turn, and he knew that whatever lay ahead, it would not be found on any map. Adrian's mind raced as he tried to piece together the implications of Cale's words. The island's secrets ran deeper than he had ever imagined, its legends intertwined with ancient magic and curses far older than the treasure he sought. What had once seemed like a straightforward quest for riches now felt like a descent into a world where myths and reality blurred. The weight of the cave's oppressive atmosphere pressed down on him, making it difficult to focus as he struggled to comprehend the enormity of what Cale had revealed. "Why are you here?" Adrian finally asked, his voice quieter now, almost hesitant. He could feel the ancient power that lingered in the air, a power that seemed to pulse in time with the steady drip of water echoing through the chamber. The question hung between them, heavy with unspoken fears and half-formed suspicions. Adrian knew there was more to Cale's story, something that went beyond the simple curse that had bound him to this island. The connection between Cale and the treasure, between the island's magic and the curse, gnawed at the edges of Adrian's thoughts, refusing to be ignored. Cale's gaze remained steady, his expression unreadable as he regarded Adrian. "I am here because I must be," he replied, his tone carrying a weight that suggested a truth far more complex than the words themselves. "The same fate that brought you to this island holds me here, bound by forces neither of us fully understand." There was a sadness in Cale's eyes, but also a resignation, as if he had long since come to terms with his situation. Yet there was a flicker of something else, too, a glimmer of hope, or perhaps determination, that hinted at a purpose beyond his curse. Cale's gaze drifted to the pedestal where the ancient scroll had once lain, the weight of history evident in his somber expression. "I guard this place," he began, his voice carrying a quiet but resolute authority. "And the secrets it holds." His words seemed to echo through the chamber, intertwining with the shadows that danced along the walls. "The treasure you seek is real, Captain, but so is the curse that protects it." There was a palpable tension in the air, a sense of foreboding that deepened with each word Cale spoke. It was clear that this was no mere legend or sailor's tale. The danger was as real as the stone beneath their feet. Cale's eyes clouded with the memory of past horrors as he continued. "My people once tried to claim the treasure, believing it would bring us untold power and wealth. But we paid the price for our greed." His voice wavered slightly, betraying the pain that still lingered after all these years. "One by one, they fell victim to the curse, their dreams of riches turned to ash. I was the last to resist, driven by the hope that I could break the cycle of destruction." He paused, the silence thick with the weight of his regret. The curse had been relentless, its grip inescapable, and for his defiance, he had been condemned to an eternity of solitude, bound to the island that had become both his prison and his charge. "I was cursed to remain here, to warn others of the danger," Cale concluded, his voice steady but filled with a deep, abiding sorrow. The duty had been a heavy one, his existence reduced to a single purpose. to protect the world from the cursed treasure that had destroyed his people. There was a haunted look in his eyes as he met Adrian's gaze, the burden of his eternal vigil weighing heavily upon him. Yet beneath that sorrow was a glint of determination, a silent plea for Adrian to heed his warning and avoid the fate that had befallen so many before him. Adrian felt a chill run through him, the cold weight of Cale's words settling deep in his chest. The treasure, the very thing he had spent years searching for, was now within his grasp, tantalizingly close. But the cost, could it be too great? The thought gnawed at him, a dark shadow creeping into the corners of his mind. He had faced storms, battles, and countless dangers on his quest for wealth and glory, but nothing had ever felt as ominous as the curse that now loomed before him. For the first time, doubt began to take root, whispering that this might be a gamble even he wasn't prepared to take. Courage had always been Adrian's defining trait, the quality that had set him apart from other men. He had built his reputation on fearlessness, on his willingness to face the unknown for the promise of gold and the thrill of adventure. But this was different. The curse that Cale spoke of wasn't a mere obstacle to be overcome or a foe to be bested. It was something far more insidious, something that could consume him in ways he couldn't fully comprehend. The chill that had settled over him deepened as he considered the possibility that he might be walking into a trap, one that no amount of bravery could free him from. The words lingered between them, thick with the gravity of what lay ahead. Adrian could feel the tension in the air, as if the very cave walls were holding their breath, waiting for his choice. The lure of the treasure was powerful, almost irresistible, whispering promises of wealth and glory that had driven him across uncharted seas. But now, standing before Cale, with the prince's solemn warning still echoing in his mind, Adrian felt the full weight of the decision bearing down on him. It was no longer just about gold. It was about something far greater and far more dangerous. Adrian's thoughts churned as he grappled with the choice before him. He had faced countless dangers in his life, navigating treacherous waters and battling fierce enemies without hesitation. But this was different. This wasn't a fight he could win with skill or bravado. It was a test of his very soul, of what he was willing to sacrifice for the promise of a treasure that might come at too high a cost. The warning in Cale's eyes was clear, a silent plea to reconsider, to weigh the consequences carefully before taking the next step. And yet, the pull of the treasure was strong, tugging at his resolve, urging him to press on despite the risks. He had come so far, endured so much to reach this point. Turning back now felt like betrayal, of his dreams, of his crew, of the very man he believed himself to be. But as he looked into Cale's sorrowful gaze, Adrian realized that some choices couldn't be made lightly. The treasure might be within his grasp, but the path to it was shadowed with uncertainty, with a darkness that could consume everything he held dear. The decision loomed before him, vast and insurmountable, as the clash between desire and caution raged within his heart. Adrian's voice cut through the thick silence of the cave, firm yet edged with the uncertainty that gnawed at his resolve. He had made up his mind, at least as much as he could in the face of the unknown. The words left his lips with a determination that surprised even him, as if by speaking them, he could somehow steel himself against the doubts that lingered in the back of his mind. The decision he faced was monumental, but he couldn't turn back now. Whatever the cost, he needed to know what lay ahead, to understand the path that would either lead him to unimaginable fortune or to ruin. Cale's gaze held Adrian's, a flicker of something unreadable passing through those deep, oceanic eyes. For a moment, the prince said nothing, as if weighing the gravity of the question before answering. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, yet there was a heaviness to it that made the air feel thicker, more oppressive. "The path is not an easy one, Captain," Cale began, his tone laced with a quiet intensity. "It will test you in ways you cannot yet imagine, demanding more than just your strength or your wits. To break the curse, you must confront the darkness within yourself as much as the dangers that lie ahead. It will require sacrifice, a sacrifice that goes beyond what you are prepared to give." Adrian's heart pounded as Cale's words settled over him, each one sinking deeper into his thoughts. The implications were clear. The quest for the treasure would demand a toll that might be more than he was willing to pay. Yet, even as the weight of those words bore down on him, Adrian felt a strange resolve harden in his chest. He had asked for the truth, and now that he had it, there was no turning back. Whatever the challenge, whatever the sacrifice, he would face it head on. "Tell me," Adrian repeated, his voice unwavering. "Tell me what I must do." Cale's gaze lingered on Adrian, his eyes narrowing slightly as if he could see straight into the captain's soul, measuring his strength and resolve. The silence between them stretched, heavy with unspoken truths and the weight of what was to come. Finally Cale nodded, but it was a slow, deliberate movement, one that conveyed both acceptance and sorrow. The sadness in his eyes deepened, as if he bore witness to a future already written, a future steeped in both triumph and tragedy. "Very well, Captain," Cale said, his voice carrying a gravity that sent a chill through the air. "But know this, the choice you make now will not only shape your fate, but the fate of all who follow you." The tension within him grew, a battle between his desire for the treasure and the creeping realization that some things might not be worth the risk. He had always believed that he could outsmart any challenge, that his wit and tenacity would see him through. But as he stood there, staring at the haunted figure of Cale, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was teetering on the edge of something far more dangerous than he had ever encountered. The treasure called to him, but so did the warning in Cale's eyes, a warning that perhaps, this time, courage alone might not be enough. Adrian's voice, usually so strong and commanding, was barely more than a whisper as he asked the question that had been clawing at the edges of his mind. "Is there a way to break the curse?" The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of his hopes and fears. He had always been a man of action, someone who faced challenges head-on, but this was different. This was a fight against something intangible, something that defied the logic and reason he relied on. The thought that there might be a way to free Cale, to lift the curse that bound this place, stirred a flicker of hope within him, though it was tinged with uncertainty. Cale's gaze met Adrian's, and for a moment, the sorrow in his eyes deepened, as if the question itself carried a burden too great to bear. "There may be a way," he replied slowly, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "But it is not without risk. The magic that binds me is ancient and powerful, woven into the very fabric of this island. To break it would require a sacrifice of equal measure to the curse itself." His words were like a cold wind cutting through the stillness of the cave, a stark reminder that nothing came without a price. Adrian's heart pounded as he absorbed Cale's answer, realizing that the path ahead was far more treacherous than he had imagined. The room seemed to darken as the implications of Cale's words sank in. The possibility of breaking the curse, of freeing the island and its guardian, was now tantalizingly real, but at what cost? Adrian had always known that the pursuit of treasure was fraught with danger, but this was no ordinary quest. The sacrifice Cale spoke of was no simple bargain. It was a test of will, of resolve, and perhaps of his very soul. The gravity of the choice before him weighed heavily on his shoulders, and for the first time in a long while, Adrian found himself questioning the true price of his ambition. Cale's words hung heavy in the air, laden with a foreboding that Adrian couldn't easily dismiss. The cave, once a mere shelter from the storm, now felt like a tomb, filled with the weight of ancient sorrows and forgotten sacrifices. Adrian's pulse quickened, the prospect of the treasure seeming both closer and farther away than ever before. It was no longer just a matter of gold and glory. Now, it involved choices that could ripple far beyond his own fate. He had spent years chasing legends and seeking riches, but this was the first time he truly questioned what he was willing to risk, what he was willing to lose. As the silence stretched between them, Adrian's thoughts churned. He had always considered himself a man of courage, one who faced danger without flinching. But Cale's mention of sacrifice struck a chord deep within him. This wasn't the straightforward battle he was used to. It was a challenge that would test not just his bravery, but his very soul. Could he confront the darkness that Cale spoke of, knowing that the consequences could extend far beyond his own life? Could he shoulder the burden of responsibility not just for himself, but for those who depended on him, for the crew who had followed him into the unknown? The uncertainty gnawed at him, a cold, insidious fear that threatened to take root. Cale's gaze remained steady, as if he understood the turmoil roiling within Adrian. "The path ahead is fraught with peril," he had said, and Adrian knew that was an understatement. The prince's warning had shifted the stakes entirely. If he chose to pursue the treasure, it would not be just another adventure. It would be a journey that demanded everything of him, perhaps even more than he was willing to give. The decision lay heavy on his shoulders, but as he looked into Cale's sorrowful eyes, Adrian realized that the choice wasn't just his to make. It was a crossroads, one that would determine not just his future, but the fate of all those bound by the curse and the secrets hidden on this mysterious island. The words hung in the air, their meaning sinking in like the cold, damp mist that surrounded them. Adrian felt a shiver run down his spine as Cale's warning continued. "The sea is unforgiving," Cale continued, his tone growing more somber. "But so too is the magic that binds this island. It is ancient, unyielding, and it cares nothing for the dreams or desires of men. Once you set foot on this path, there will be no turning back. Be certain of your resolve, Captain, for the journey ahead is one of darkness and light, of loss and gain. The choices you make will echo far beyond this moment, leaving their mark on you and those who stand by your side." Adrian's breath caught in his throat as he absorbed Cale's words, their full weight pressing down on him like the heavy mist that clung to the island. The stakes were clearer now than ever before. This was not just a quest for gold, but a journey that would test him in ways he had never imagined. There would be no easy answers, no simple victories. The path ahead was fraught with peril, its twists and turns leading toward an uncertain future where both darkness and light awaited. And once he took that first step, there would be no escape, no retreat. Adrian nodded slowly, the gravity of the moment settling over him like a shroud. He was committed, but Cale's warning lingered in his mind, a shadow that would follow him wherever this path might lead. With a final glance at the ancient carvings on the cave walls, Adrian took a deep breath and followed Cale into the darkness. The flickering lantern in his hand cast trembling shadows that seemed to dance and shift with each step, barely piercing the oppressive gloom that surrounded him. The air grew colder, and the echo of their footsteps reverberated off the stone walls, creating an eerie, hollow sound that heightened the tension in his chest. Every instinct told him to turn back, but the pull of the unknown, the possibility of treasure, of breaking the curse, drove him forward. The path ahead was treacherous, yet it was one he knew he had to walk. The cave seemed to twist and wind endlessly, the walls narrowing and expanding in a disorienting pattern that made it difficult to judge how far they had come. Cale moved with an unsettling grace, his form barely discernible in the dim light, a figure both ethereal and ancient, bound by a magic that Adrian could hardly comprehend. The weight of Cale's warning hung heavy in the air, and with each step, Adrian felt the pressure of the decision he was about to make. The stakes were higher than ever before. The path he was on was fraught with danger, not just for himself but for everyone who had followed him on this journey. The very fate of his crew, and perhaps more, now rested on the choices he would make in the coming moments. As they ventured deeper, the darkness seemed to close in around them, the light from the lantern barely illuminating the way. The silence grew heavier, broken only by the soft rustling of Cale's movements and the distant drip of water echoing through the cave. Finally, Cale came to a stop, and Adrian could just make out the faint outline of another chamber ahead, its entrance yawning like the mouth of some great beast. Adrian's breath quickened as he realized that this was it, the moment that would define everything. He tightened his grip on the lantern and steeled himself for whatever lay beyond, determined to face whatever darkness awaited him. The island's secret had been unveiled, but the path before Adrian remained shrouded in uncertainty. With the revelation of the curse and the haunting presence of the cursed prince guiding him, Adrian knew that this was only the beginning of a far greater ordeal. As he stepped deeper into the cave, each echoing footfall seemed to reverberate with the gravity of the choices that lay ahead. The promise of treasure, though tantalizing, was now intertwined with the weight of an ancient curse that threatened to reshape not only his journey but his very existence. The oppressive darkness of the cave swallowed them whole, the flickering lantern casting eerie, unpredictable shadows along the walls. Every step forward felt like a step into the unknown, the air growing colder and denser with each passing moment. Adrian's heart pounded with a mixture of fear and determination, driven by the hope of unlocking the treasure's secrets and breaking the curse. Yet, he could not shake the feeling that this journey was not just a physical quest but a profound test of his character and resolve. As the cave's depths loomed before him, Adrian understood that this adventure would transform him in ways he could scarcely imagine. The allure of the treasure and the enigmatic curse were intertwined with forces beyond his control, and whatever awaited him at the end of this dark passage would challenge everything he thought he knew about bravery, sacrifice, and destiny. The journey ahead promised to alter the course of his life and perhaps touch the very essence of his soul, as he ventured into the heart of the island's ancient mystery.